Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jacinta. If this is your first time here, thank you for stopping by. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how to cut and sew this beautiful crepe dress you are seeing on your screen right now. If it's what you love to learn, kindly watch till the end. And if you hit subscribe, please hit on the subscribe button below and also turn on your notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. So without wasting much time, let's jump right into the tutorial. This is the fabric I'll be using for this tutorial. It's a crepe fabric and I have 4.5 yards here. Starting off with the pattern drafting. From the tip of my pattern paper, I'll mark 1 inch downwards and square across. I'll also label that's the shoulder line. Placing my tape on the shoulder line, I'll mark 10 inches downwards, which is my bust line. I'll also mark 16 inches, which is my half length, and square across, and I'll also label the lines. On the shoulder line, I'll mark 8 inches, which is half of my shoulder measurement, and on that point, I'll come downwards by 1.5 inches for my shoulder slope. I'll also mark 3.5 inches for the neck width and 3.5 inches for the neck depth. Impute any neck measurement of your choice. I'll connect the neckline with a curve, and I'll also connect the shoulder slope. Placing my tape on the shoulder slope, I'll mark 7.5 inches downwards for my armhole level, and on that point where it ended, I'm going to extend the line and label that chest line. Then I'll connect from the armhole level to the shoulder slope with a straight line. On the midpoint of the straight line, I'll come in by ½ inch. I'll mark quarter of my bust circumference on the chest line. That is my bust circumference divided by 4. I'm going to mark it on the chest line. Then with my armhole curve, I'm going to connect from the shoulder slope, to the ½ inch I came in by, to the quarter of my bust circumference that I marked on the chest line, just like so. After drawing my armhole curve, I'm going to mark the hip line. To do that, I'll place my tape on my half length and measure 9 inches downwards. I'm also going to mark the full length, square across and label. Now for the darts, I will mark half of my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches on the bust line. I'll do the same on the half length and on the hip line, then connect with a straight line. On the half length, I'll mark ½ inch on both sides of the dart line. From the half length, I'll mark 6 inches downwards and connect the ½ inch I mark on both sides, so the 6 inches downwards and upwards to the bust line, just like the way you see me doing. I will also tighten the under bust. This is totally optional. To do that, I'm going to mark my under bust. Then on that under bust, I'll come in by ½ inch on both sides of the dart leg and connect it to the bust point and downwards to the half length, just like the way you see me doing. After that, I'm going to mark quarter of my bust circumference on the bust line, and I'm also going to mark the same on the chest line and add 1.5 inch sewing allowance. On the half length, I will mark quarter of my waist circumference. I'll also add 1.5 inch sewing allowance. I will replace the 1 inch that I took on the half length. I'll do the same thing on the hip line. I'll mark quarter of my hip circumference and add sewing allowance of 1.5 inch. On the full length, I will minus 1 inch from the measurement I have on the hip line and mark it there. Afterwards, I'll connect all the marks and cut it out. After cutting with a slight curve, I'm going to connect from the midpoint of the armhole curve to the dart line on the bust line like this. After which, I'll cut open at the half length and also cut open the curved line. For the skirt part, I'm going to remove the dart because I don't want the dart to be at the front skirt part. So I'm going to mark 1 inch by the side on the waistline and connect it to the hip line and cut it out like this. Now for the back pattern, I'm going ahead to rule my shoulder line. As you can see, placing my tape on the shoulder line, I'm going to mark 10 inches downwards, which is my bust line. I'll also mark my half length, and at the center back, I'm going to come in by 1 inch for the zip allowance. I'll go ahead and connect the zip allowance with a straight line. On the shoulder line, I will mark half of my shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches, and the neck width, which is 3.5 inches. I will mark 1.5 inches for the back neck depth. I will also mark 1.5 inch downwards for the shoulder slope. I will connect the neck width to the shoulder slope with a slanted line and connect the neckline with a curved line. I will also square across the bust line and the half length and label them. Placing my tape on the half length, I will mark 9 inches downwards, which is my hip line, and I will also mark the full length I'm working with. I will sway across and label the lines. Placing my tape on the shoulder slope, I will mark 7.5 inches downwards for the armhole level and connect with a straight line. On the point where the armhole level ended, I will extend the line and label the chest line. Then I'll find the midpoint of the straight line. On that midpoint, I'll come in by ½ inch. Then on the chest line, I will mark part of my bust circumference. Then use my curve ruler to connect from the shoulder slope to the ½ inch I came in by to the part of my bust circumference that I marked on the chest line to form my armhole curve. For the back dart, I will mark 4 inches inwards on the bust line, the half length and on the hip line and connect with a straight line. I will extend the dart line upwards by 2 inches from the bust line. On the dart line, I will mark 6 inches downwards from the half length, and on the half length, I will come in by ½ inch on both sides of the dart line. Then connect it on both sides to the extended 2 inches and downwards to the 6 inches I marked, just like the way you see me doing. Afterwards, with a slight curve, I will connect from the center of the armhole curve to the extended 2 inches like so. What I'm going to do now is to impute quarter of my body circumference. On the chest line and on the bust line, I'm going to mark quarter of my bust circumference and add 1½ inch sewing allowance. On the waistline, I will mark quarter of my waist circumference and I'll add extra 1½ inch sewing allowance and also mark 1 inch for the dart. Then on the hip line, I will divide my hip circumference by 4 and mark whatever it gave me there and add 1½ inch sewing allowance. On the full length, I'm going to minus 1 inch from the measurement I have on the hip line, after which I'll connect the marks with my ruler and cut it out. I was done connecting, I'm cutting it out now. So just like what we did for the front, I'll cut open at the half length and I'll also cut the curved line. And for the skirt dart, I'm not going to cut it out because the back skirt is going to have that. After cutting this pattern, I'm going to cut each of them on my fabric unfold. Now for my long sleeve, I've gone ahead to fold my fabric into 2 and I'm going to rule a starting line. Placing my tape on the starting line, I will mark 4½ inches downwards. This is the biceps line. I'll also mark 9 inches downwards, which is the arm or the short sleeve length. 13 inches, which is the elbow length, and the full length is 23 inches. I'm adding extra 2 inches. The 2 inches is for folding, making it 25 inches. So I'll square across these lines. On the bicep line, I will mark half of my armhole circumference and connect it to the starting line. I'll find the midpoint of this slanted line and make a mark there. With a curve ruler, I'm going to connect from that midpoint to the starting line this way and from the midpoint also to the biceps line. On the short sleeve line, I will mark half of my arm circumference and add extra 1½ inch sewing allowance. On the elbow line, I will mark half of my elbow circumference and add 1½ inch sewing allowance. The same thing on the full length. I will mark half of my wrist circumference and add extra 1½ inch sewing allowance. After that, I'm going to connect the marks. Then go ahead and cut it out. After cutting this first sleeve, I'll fold my fabric into 2 and place it on it, then cut the second sleeve. Now for the flounce at the center front of the skirt part, I'm going to cut it in form of a flare. So I'm going ahead to fold my fabric into 2. I'm going to fold it into 4, just like the way you fold your fabric when cutting a full flare. After folding into 4 like this, what you're going to do next is to impute the radius. The radius is where you mark the waist measurement when cutting a flare. Though I didn't use a specific measurement because I wanted to pleat. But what you're going to do is to measure the distance from the waist of your front piece skirt to the full length. That is from the half length to the full length, because that is where you are going to be attaching this flounce. After taking the measurements, you are going to add extra 5 inches for pleating of the flounce. That is if you want, but trust me, it comes out more beautiful when it's pleated a little. Whatever you get after adding 5 inches to your measurement, you divide it by 6.28. Then from the tip of this folded fabric, you're going to mark that measurement you've gotten after dividing by 6.28. You're going to mark it round like this. I'm also going to mark the length of the flounce. I used 8 inches. This 8 inches includes the folding of the down part and joining of the upper part. After marking the 8 inches, I will connect it. Then go ahead and cut it out. After cutting this first one, I'll fold my fabric into four again, place this one on it and cut it out. After cutting the two flares, I'm going to open one side of each of them. Now for the ruffles at the upper part, I'll fold my fabric into two and cut a long piece of fabric. I marked 5 inches as the wideness. The length does not have any specific measurement. I made it as long as possible because I'm going to be making gathers. Then I ahead and cut it out. After cutting it, I'm going to open it up. Remember, it was on fold, so I'll open it up and I have two pieces of this fabric now. So what I'm going to do is to take one piece and fold it into two like this. I'm going to close this open side. Then I'm going to gather the center. Either you use your machine or you use thread and needle to make gathers at the center. You can join the two pieces of fabric to do this once, or you can do it separately. I've gone ahead to cut all my pattern pieces on my fabric, as you can see. So what I'm going to do now is to join all the pieces together. So this is the center front and the side front. I'm going to join it together using 1/2 inch. While I was cutting on my fabric, I added 1/2 inch on all the sides, as you can see. So I'm going to also join the center back and the side back with 1/2 inch. Before then, I'm going to cut the facing that we use to turn the neckline. To cut the facing, I folded this piece of fabric I have here into two, and I'm going to place my center front piece on it. Go ahead and cut your facing whatever shape or size you want. For me, I marked 3 inches from the neck depth, and I also marked 3 inches on the shoulder. I'll trace and cut out the neckline. I'll remove the main fabric and connect from the shoulder to the neckline like this. Then I'm going to cut it out as well. I will do exactly the same for the center back piece. All I'm going to do now is to trace the dart on the back skirt. It's either you use your office pin or you use a tracing wheel. So I'm going to use a tracing wheel to trace this dart so that it will appear on the skirt. Then I'll use my chalk to draw it out. After doing this, I'll go back to my machine and sew the dart. I'll also join the upper part and turn the neckline. I was done joining the front and back of the upper piece. What I'm going to do now is to turn the neckline with the facing using 1/2 inch. So I've placed each of them front facing front. I'll go over to my machine now and sew it using 1/2 inch. I was done joining the facing. What I'm going to do now is to trace out this allowance so that when I turn it, it will relax. After trimming the allowance, I'll take the facing inside, then use my hemming gun to hold it down, or you can also top stitch on the facing, then iron it so that it will relax. What I'm going to do now is to attach the flare to the front skirt center. So I've gone ahead to weave the down part. I was trying to fold the down part, but it was not giving me what I want, so I had to weave it. So this is the skirt part of the front piece. I'm going to fold the hem. After folding the down part, I'm going to notch the midpoint of the waistline, and I'm also going to mark the midpoint of the hem. So I'm going to find the midpoint of the up and down, because that is where we are going to attach the flare. You can draw a straight line from the center up to the center down, so that when you are fixing when you're attaching the flare, it will be straight. It will be on the center. I'm going to fold the beginning and ending of the flare twice before attaching it. I'm going to join the front upper part to the skirt part of the front using 1/2 inch before attaching the flare. I was done with that, as you can see. What I'm going to do now is to mark 1/2 inch on both sides of the center of this skirt part. Remember, we notched the center, so we're going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides of the center of the skirt part because the flare is 2. So that is exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm marking 1/2 inch. I'm marking 1/2 inch on both sides of the center of this skirt part because that is where I'm going to be attaching the 2 flares. So I'm going to place it this way. You see the way I placed it, front facing front, on one of the 1/2 inch line that I drew. So I'm going to sew it on that 1/2 inch line, and as I'm sewing it, I'm going to be making little pleats. So I'll go over to my machine and do this and come and show you guys. So I was done attaching one of the flares, as you can see, and you can see the little pleats I made. So what I'm going to, after sewing it, is going to be like this. When you turn it, you can see how neat it is on the front. So I'm going to attach the second flare on the other half-inch line. Make sure you are sewing it very close. It shouldn't be up to half-inch. Use quarter-inch to sew. I was done joining the two flares, and this is what it looks like. You can see how beautiful it came out. What I'm going to do now is to do the ruffles on the upper part. So I've gone ahead to turn and iron this piece of fabric. I'm going to make gathers at the center. You can make gather stitches with your machine, but I'm going to be using thread and needle. I was done with the ruffles, and this is what it looks like. What I'm going to do now is to join it to the dress. So it's going to start from the shoulder and end on the half length. On the shoulder, I'm going to mark 1 inch from the neck width, and on the half length, I'm going to mark ½ inch from the center of the half length. That is where the ruffles will stop. They use a ruler to connect the 2 points in a slanted line. So I'm going to attach the ruffles in this line that I'm rolling now. I'll get the ruffle and start tacking it on that line. This is not something your machine can sew, so you have to tack with your hand needle. I'll do this off camera. Please take your time to do this carefully so it will come out nice. I was untacking the ruffles, and it really came out beautiful. And I've also gone ahead to join the shoulders of the front and back. What I'm going to do now is to join the upper back and the skirt part of the back using ½ inch. And I'm also going to attach the two sleeves using ½ inch. I was done with that. The last thing I'm going to do now is to close the side and to attach the zip. So this is where I'm going to be attaching the zip. I marked 2 inches for the folding of the down part of the back. From that 2 inches, I marked 8 inches for the slits. For the zip, I marked 20 inches downwards from the neckline. This is where I attach the zip. For closing of the two sides, I'm going to use 1½ inch to close the two sides and also the sleeve, because that is the allowance we added when we were drafting the dress. And that will be all for the cutting and sewing of this dress. If you find this video helpful and you've learned something new, please hit on that subscribe button below. Turn on your notification bell. It goes a long way to encourage me, guys. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in my next tutorial.